Derek? Hello, everybody. It's good to see you once again. We continue our study under this wonderful topic, fulfilling our obligations to neighbors. This is the topic for this entire month of March, fulfilling our obligations to neighbors. We started with love acts. Love demonstrates. Love gets off the couch. And the personal application was recognizing our debts to others. Today we're looking at physical and spiritual fitness. We're familiar with physical fitness. We go to the gym and we work out. And physical, that's simply the body's ability to function efficiently. That's why we go out and we work out. We keep our bodies fit. Spiritual fitness, the goal of spiritual fitness must be godliness. Intentional actions you engage in to cultivate a deeper connection with God. That's spiritual fitness. As newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. The personal application is keeping fit for the sake of others. Keeping fit. A strong, healthy body allows you to show up for your family, your children, your friends. Show up for church. The scripture in this lesson is Daniel, chapter 1, 8 through 17. 1 Timothy, chapter 4, 7 and 8. There's Daniel, chapter 1, 8 through 17, and 1 Timothy, chapter 4, 7 and 8. This is March 8, 2026 lesson. The unifying principle is just the crux of the lesson, and this is the bottom line. We desire to be strong and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. What can enable us to keep physically and spiritually fit? Well, the book of Daniel and Paul's first letter to Timothy both stress the significance of striving for physical and spiritual fitness as pleasing to God and beneficial to others. Daniel speaks to the physical aspect, Timothy to the spiritual aspect. So we start off with the test of physical discipline. Discipline is the key. Daniel's faithfulness to the Lord, determined to trust and be steadfast to the Lord. Verse 8 says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. We see a powerful example of faith and conviction in one's belief in this verse. Daniel's decision not to defile himself and his request to eat other food. He turned down the T-bone and the baked potato. His decision to follow God's laws over conforming to worldly customs showcases his unwavering commitment to his faith and values. This act of defiance against the status quo highlights the importance of staying true to our beliefs, even when faced with societal pressure to do otherwise. We would find that the Lord had caused the chief official to respect Daniel. The official was reluctant to grant the request in verse 9. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion from the palace master. God's favor and compassion worked in Daniel's life, as seen in this verse. Daniel's belief and trust in God allowed him to experience special and undeserved treatment from the chief official. It shows us that when we remain faithful and obedient to God, he can open doors for us and make a way where there seems to be no way. This verse reminds us of the power of God's grace in our lives, and it can influence others around us. I remember my wife was in the church many years before I started. She would go to church every Sunday, come home without fail. My not going to church did not influence my wife, but her going to church might have influenced me, because I started to go to church every Sunday with her, even today. So it challenges us to reflect on our own actions and faithfulness to God, and consider how we can also experience his favor and compassion in our everyday lives. So the official was reluctant because the king had ordered this very food. In verse 10, the palace master said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king. He has appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in poorer condition than the other young men of your age, you would endanger my head with the king. He was afraid because the young men might become pale, it says, and undernourished. That's what he was thinking. And because the king would execute him, he thought. So Daniel's unwavering faith and commitment to his beliefs is powerfully displayed here. Despite being in a foreign land and facing pressure to conform to the ways of the king, Daniel chooses to stay true to his principles. Daniel is not only making a statement about his personal integrity, but also demonstrating his devotion to God by refusing to consume the food and wine provided by the king. Daniel's gracious request for a 10-day test. See, Daniel was looking for a compromise. So this verse is about Daniel's determination to remain faithful to God's laws by requesting a plant-based diet in defiance of the luxurious offerings of the king. Now, look at verse 11. Then Daniel asked the God to whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah. He decided that he would not compromise his beliefs. Daniel is not only demonstrating his obedience to God's laws, but also his courage to uphold his beliefs even in the face of potential consequences by refusing to defile himself with the king's food. What it boiled down to was the king's commands versus Daniel's faithfulness. Couple of things here. Number one, he requested nothing but vegetables and water. Look at verse 12. Please test your servant for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Here we witness a powerful display of faith and commitment to one's beliefs here. Daniel's decision to refuse the king's food symbolizes his unwavering dedication to honoring God's commands above all else. This act serves as a reminder to us all that sometimes staying true to our faith may require us to make bold and potentially challenging decisions and choices that go against the norms of the world around us. Sometimes you might have to stand while the world is sitting. He requested that their appearance be compared with others who ate the king's rich food. Verse 13, you can then compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations and deal with your servants according to what you observe. This act of faith not only demonstrates his trust in God's provision, but also his willingness to be tested based on his convictions. The phrase, then let our appearance be examined before you, encapsulates Daniel's boldness and reliance on God's faithfulness. He didn't rely on that phrase, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. No, he didn't. By Subjecting themselves to scrutiny based on their diet, Daniel and his friends exhibit a profound trust in God's guidance and protection. Then Daniel's response for a test accepted. Game on. Look at verse 14. So he agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. So when we read this verse, it speaks to us about the importance of making choices that honor our own convictions and beliefs, even in difficult circumstances. By agreeing to test Daniel and his friends, the attendant demonstrates openness. But more importantly, Daniel's resolve not to compromise his faith comes through. This situation shows us that even in foreign lands or circumstances that may feel against our beliefs, we can still find a way to honor God. Sometimes you have this feeling that this is not right. This is not right. Before I was saved, I talked my wife into going to this club. And we were sitting in that club, and then I could tell she was uneasy. Then she said, let's go. Let's go. We left. See, something just wasn't right. Yeah, I was okay. But something just wasn't right with it. So the message encouraged us to find compromises that uphold our values. Just don't ever quit on God. The appearance and health of Daniel and his friends looked better at the end of 10 days. Verse 15 says, at the end of 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. See, Daniel's request to eat vegetables and drink water was not just about food preferences. It was rooted in his desire to remain obedient to God's commandments. By standing firm in his faith, now, Daniel took a bold step that could have brought serious consequences. So instead of fearing the potential repercussions, he exhibited courage and trust in God. The 10 days of testing demonstrated God's provision and the health benefits of following his dietary guidelines. So we know we must trust the Lord at all times. Trust his diet. The official granted Daniel's request for a permanent diet of vegetables and water. They put that on the menu. Verse 16 says, so the God continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. The outcome following Daniel's request leads to a remarkable turn of events. At the end of a trial period, Daniel and his friends appear healthier and better nourished than those who consumed the royal food. This not only affirms the benefits of their dietary choice, but also displays God's providence in honoring those who remain faithful to him. There's a passage that says, if you obey the Lord, he will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. There will not be room enough to hold it. So it's a vivid illustration that God's ways are often higher than ours, and following him can yield unexpected blessings. So we find that Daniel and his friends' faithfulness richly rewarded by God. To these 4 young men in verse 17, God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had insight into all visions and dreams. This verse highlights the importance of knowledge and skill granted by God. It's crucial to understand that knowledge is not merely the accumulation of facts and information. Instead, divine knowledge relates to wisdom, the ability to apply what we have learned in real life situations. Daniel and his friends did not just learn about the world around them, they learned about God's truth, which shaped their understanding of life itself. The second subtopic is the priority of spiritual training. We move to 1 Timothy chapter 4. It says, he avoids frivolous speculations. This is the priority of spiritual training. This is what he does. He avoids foolish speculation. Verse 7 says, have nothing to do with profane and foolish tales. Train yourself in godliness. The King James, he says, but refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness. This verse, Paul is giving guidance to Timothy about the significance of focusing on spiritual growth over trivial matters. He emphasizes the necessity of avoiding pointless discussions or myths that do not add to one's faith. Instead, he calls for personal discipline focused on godliness. Some people say, well, I don't eat ham. Well, that's okay. Don't buy it. Don't cook it. That's fine. He says the mention of profane and old wives' fables signals that there will always be stories or beliefs that are misleading and can distract us from our spiritual journey. Paul's message encourages us to intentionally choose what nourishes our faith, not necessarily our bodies. All right. And then the third subtopic is the promise of godly fitness. It says he avoids frivolous speculations in verse 7. In verse 8 said he exercises himself to godliness. Look at verse 8. It says, for while physical training is of some value, it is of some value. Godliness is valuable in every way, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. So what he's saying that in this verse, we find a meaningful comparison between physical exercise and physical fitness. The first part tells us that while bodily exercise has some value and can improve your health, it is only a part of our lives. We need to consider what benefits our soul and our relationship with God. This distinction emphasizes that spiritual growth and godliness have lasting value beyond what we can achieve physically. It reminds us that our spiritual life should be our priority. There's a life after this life. And so what we do, we use this life to set up the next life. That's what we do. Look at the principle. Stay clear of silly stories that get dressed up as religion. Exercise yourself in faith workouts to stay spiritually fit. That came from the Message Bible. I want to thank you for being here. See you again next time.